Andrew Dawson,
Yeah,
thanks,
man.
man. I really appreciate it. And what you're involved in is something that needs to be brought to the forefront a whole lot more than it is. It is. It's something that, on an elitist level, I feel is purposely extinguished a little bit as far as the focus of it and really what's going on. Maybe I'm not using the right terminology there, but that's just what it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big problem that's going on everywhere,
Yeah.
and there's not a whole lot of talk about it. And so why don't you fill us in kind of on what it is that you do, and then we'll just kind of break that down, and then how you're able to continually do that.
Yeah, man.
So,
Yeah. Well, it's good to be here, dude, and hang out and
Yeah.
and be in the studio. So
Cool.
super stoked, man. Yeah, you're just to respond to what you were saying at first. It is a huge issue,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like in the past, 10 years or so, since like 2000 or so, it's really become 20 years now, but it's started to become a buzzword. It kind of peaked in the last few years, the last decade of this being some kind of buzzword issue that we hear about. And you've seen organizations popping up everywhere who are, combating human trafficking. But we dived in about, I would say 8 years ago, full time into this work. And it's been a phenomenal ride as far as us not being experts, like just being willing people to jump into something that is a huge issue that we felt passionate about and wanted to do something about.
Yeah.
And it's really been a huge learning curve from our perspective, from the outside, diving in, taking 8 years of our lives and just throwing it into this issue, and then having now this perspective on the other side of those years, just a few years. And we're not obviously experts, but seeing it from this side now, it's a completely different perspective when it comes to, like you said, it's a issue everywhere. It's not just in metropolitan areas like
Right.
LA on Figueroa Street. People, you can YouTube that, like it's intense in some of these metropolitan areas, inner city areas, where it's like on the street, it's above the radar, it's out there. But really, the truth is, man, it's an issue that even rural communities across America, small towns, medium-sized towns, everyone's dealing with it.
It would seem that, and I could be totally wrong about this, but even like your smaller towns might be more vulnerable than maybe metropolitan areas, because there's not a whole lot of infrastructure set up in a lot of those rural areas.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
yeah.
to as far as being able to watch children closely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I don't know, maybe there's a natural ignorance that might come with, like
Yeah.
rural areas. And
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, in a lot of rural communities, what we've seen, it's not so much of like uneducation or ignorance as far as like not smart people in those communities. Obviously, there's some it's more of this awareness factor. This doesn't happen in our community. This has never happened in our community. We've never had
right.
these
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
Even with law enforcement, who does an amazing job, in rural communities. Sometimes they don't deal with the caseload as much as other communities that are bigger, or cities. And so there is this sense that, hey, this isn't happening in rural communities until it happens. And then
Right.
it's like, oh man, we're dealing with this.
Yeah.
And so that comes down to this awareness factor. There's a statistic out there, it comes from the FBI, I mean, it's just like known fact that there's trafficking cases in all 50 states. You know, in the last few years, all 50 states are having, you know, prosecuted trafficking cases, and a lot of those are coming from rural communities. And we do let our guard down in rural communities. I mean, I worked in Montana for many years in central Montana in a very rural community, and you leave your car door unlocked. You know,
Right,
you know
yeah.
your neighbors.
Yep.
You just have a sense of community. You know people, and you know, in a real sense, that's a healthy community. I mean, people look out for each other, but also that's a great area for predators to come in and go, hey, these people, you know, have
Yep.
their guard down a little bit. They're more you know, focused on their community, and people are safe here, and cars are unlocked, and people just trust people, and that's one of those places where predators absolutely jump in and go, hey, this is something we can make as a target. So I think we've got to be aware in all communities, dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think just kind of going along in like crime or anything like that, Grand Junction is in the last 10 years has really kind of been awakened through that process of, okay, I do have to lock my doors. I do have to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because, not to tangent too far off, but we built a house and moved into, built a house and moved into it over by Canyon View Park, and within like the first 5 years we lived there, my car was broke into 3 times.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it's,
Yeah.
and now I'm so hypersensitive to it, obviously. So
We had that going on too. We moved to Vegas in 2017 with the work we're doing with Free, and you know, we were in a great neighborhood. It wasn't a gated community in the Southwest, but coming from Montana to Vegas, dude, we were like, okay, you know, we're obviously going to lock our doors and, you know, be safe. But the amount of crime that was happening in our community, and we called it the ghetto bird. It would fly over our community. You know, and there was many nights where the spotlight would come down from the helicopter, the police helicopter, and shine in our backyard.
oh gosh,
You know,
that's
like looking for somebody.
real deal.
Yeah.
Like,
So, you know, we were exposed to that immediately, and like, oh man, what, you know, where do we move?
Yeah.
Just making that change really was a huge perspective change
Oh,
for
yeah,
us.
sure.
And having, you know, break-ins. We had somebody almost steal my truck in front of my house, and
Yeah.
you know, you just I think it just depends on your culture, your demographic, where you live, how you perceive people and your community.
yeah.
And we've really, no matter where we're at, when it comes to sexual predators, human trafficking, we've really got to do our due diligence and say, hey, this could happen literally, dude, anywhere. And,
Anywhere,
yeah.
yeah.
And a lot of times it comes down to like grooming. I think people think trafficking is some guy pulling up into a you know, mall parking lot and snagging this girl and, you know, putting a hood over her head and duct taping her hands and feet, throwing her in the van,
In the white
peeling
van,
out. Yeah.
no windows,
You know, the
yeah.
criminals, and it's like, oh my gosh, she was abducted, or breaking into the home in the middle of the night and stealing somebody's daughter or son. And that would probably be like less than 1% of most trafficking cases. You know, I'm positive of that. It's just in our experience, like that's like less than 1%. A majority, most all the cases we've dealt with that we've seen with law enforcement working with them or with like the FBI, it comes down to a grooming situation. And that can happen anywhere. That's not just inner city. I mean, that can
Right.
happen with a, you know, an older person, 21, 22, some Romeo kid luring some girl away from home, talking her into like running away with him, just a kind of a relational deal, a grooming situation
Yeah.
where they're connecting with them online or through, you know, social media somehow.
Getting
That's
some sort of like emotional hook into them.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're willing to go with them. There's no chains. There's no duct tape. There's no, you know,
Yeah.
cage. It's a relationship. And one of the guys we work with, who is the search director for Free International, he's got this like massive credential list from like the Navy and all this, just an amazing career. He does most of our investigation and search work. He's the director of that. He always says, you know, kids are usually running from something or to something. And
Brilliant,
it's
yeah.
those vulnerable fringe kids who can be groomed and who can be, lured away because they're running either away from a troubled home or a bad situation. And there's this person offering help, or offering love and care that they're not getting from home. That's a majority of what happens.
It's such a synthetic deception going on. That's scary, man.
Yeah, man. It's that's part of that perspective change that we faced coming into this work, was just realizing, and I didn't really realize how uneducated I was on the issue. In my world, it was working in as a youth counselor and leader. It was more of just hey, this happens in Thailand or Amsterdam, or red light districts, or in the cities and stuff. But it's been a wild ride, man, since we jumped into this. So yeah,
gosh, it's infuriating, to be honest with you. Like it I don't know. It's just one of those things that sometimes you feel a little, I guess you feel hopeless, but yet that there's groups like you guys that are trying to make a change, or at least save some people and save some lives. But I don't. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So break down for us then. Kind of the victims that you guys don't call them victims, do you? Is there a terminology that you?
Yeah, I mean, they're a victim.
Okay, yeah,
become survivors. Sure. Yeah, man.
I had talked to other people and we're like, we don't like calling them victims, and I'm like, okay, well that's fine.
Well, that's a good tangent to jump on too. I mean, if we have time.
Yeah,
so I don't,
absolutely.
There's in this work there is a lot of like, I don't know if it's called semantics. It's kind of a soapbox issue with me, because every year it kind of changes. It changes to, like, we can say this about survivors, or we can communicate in this way. And I think a lot of that, in my mind, is elitism. If you come in this with a good heart, no matter how you say it, like if your heart is right, you're like, hey, they're a victim. Oh, don't call them victims, or they're, there's one way we say it, we call, I was in a training class where it's like, hey, we don't call them prostitutes, but we call them prostituted women. And I actually like that, because that just says, hey, this is happening to them. This isn't something they chose.
Sure.
And as you dive into the back end story of their lives, and you begin to learn about this trauma that's happened in their lives, you really realize that prostitution is a choice for women who have no choice. And that's really not their choice.
Right.
And so, the term, hey, we're going to call them prostituted women, not a prostitute on the streets or something like that. I think that terminology makes sense, but I think we can get caught up in that, like that zone of like, oh, what are the right words? What's the right terms? Right. I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah.
Man, if your heart is right, don't worry about it.
Let's grind in getting this to the issues. And and that's just our human nature too.
Yeah.
Like we get caught up on these
semantics,
little tiny semantics. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that plays into elitism and professionalism and wanting to be, the best and correct. But no, that's awesome. You were saying break it down though. Break down.
Yeah, kind of break down the victims that you are dealing with, and maybe give us an idea of like what type of victim you're working with more than others, and this is just because I'm kind of getting at like what your focus is, as far as like what you do, and then we'll get into the organization that you're also working for as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just on our caseload, we deal a lot with a concerned parent, a concerned grandparent, or foster parents who are dealing with a typical, I would say most of our work, this is not everything, it's always kind of a shot in the dark depending on what happens, but most of what we deal with is a concerned parent calls and says, hey, I'm in a situation, there's my daughter who, is a troubled teen in a bad situation, in a relationship with someone in a potential grooming situation. And so we get that call as investigators to step in and begin to walk parents through this crisis situation where maybe it's a runaway, or maybe they've ran away, they come back, they're just in this zone of there's something happening. It's not technically trafficking. There's been no prosecution, no arrests, but we know because of the red flags that have popped up that there's something going on. And would you be able to step in? And so a lot of our work, our advocacy work, has been partnering with parents, grandparents, foster parents, coming in and saying, hey, we can start an investigation. We can begin to do some deep dive work into your child's relationships, even some almost like private investigation. Come in and say, hey, we're going to figure out what's going on. And then when things if things do end up in a bad place, or that student runs away, or that child runs away, or something happens, we already have a caseload. We already have this file, this case of information that we can then turn into law enforcement and say, hey, this is who we know. They're probably with this person. They're with that person. This is who they were hanging out with. And we can help curb that if we can't completely stop them from being in a bad spot, and help the parents walk through that crisis conversation. So
you guys are focusing more like on almost preventative, rather in trying to rescue them before they get into the really thick of things.
Yeah. I mean, we always say that prevention is better than rescue, hands down.
Absolutely.
Like that's, if we can
for
focus,
their mental state, post trauma or whatever.
Absolutely. If we can prevent any time, it's always going to be better than rescue. But we're always going to have those individuals that are in need of rescue, and there's always going to be those individuals who we're not going to get to. So we do need work in those areas, but we need so much more emphasis on prevention and education and being able to respond. I mean, gosh, I have 2 daughters. Like, if we can do, if I can intersect in their life before something goes bad, we're absolutely going to do that. And so that's really where we personally, on my caseload, what I do, that's what we've been working on a lot with Free International now as we transition into that organization. So we work with 3 organizations.
Okay.
My wife and I founded Operation for Freedom, and we work with Free International as well as Say Something School Assemblies. So we've kind of got this trifecta of organizations we work with, depending on the time of year. But Free International they've been around since 2007, and their emphasis has really been missing kid searches and partnering with local communities, local organizations on the grounds, and really bringing together a community of advocacy and coming together, kind of like a coalition, to say, hey, we're going to do something, we're going to partner, we're going to collaborate together, we're going to resource law enforcement, and we're going to go in and actually help communities find all these missing kids. And they do that through these events called big searches. And so going into a city and gathering case work from social workers and missing kids, and rallying the troops, coming in and providing leads and sending out volunteers onto the streets to find these kids and bring them back to their families, or back into DFS or whatever. They really do a great job of that. And Free International actually works from A to Z as far as the trafficking work, from like the point of the spear, volunteers who, I always call them guys with beards and guns and tattoos, ex-military or active duty military and law enforcement, who are able to partner with law enforcement. They've got the credentials, they've got the training, they're approved and ready to roll in. Law enforcement utilizes them as a resource. And then transitioning from that to taking a survivor or a victim to a home and getting them the necessary resources they need, and then into partnership organizations who basically fill in the gaps of that. It takes an army, man. It's not like one organization can do everything out there, so they basically partner with so many organizations to make this happen. I'm always suspicious of organizations in any industry who throw out all these massive numbers. Just knowing the work that we do and how hard it is, it's like, man, it takes so many people to make it happen. But that's kind of how Free works. Free actually stands for Find, Restore, Embrace, and Empower. And so that's kind of the focus that they do. And so, yeah.
Where are these organizations kind of headquarters out of?
So Free International is based out of Las Vegas.
Okay.
And that's their home base. They primarily work with law enforcement there, and they've got team members back east, in the eastern side of the United States, and a couple dispersed here and there. So
Is Vegas kind of like the main highway of trafficking?
it's probably one of the most prevalent, like on the radar places, above, like out there, so you can see it. Places in America, yeah. I mean, that's where it's Sin City. That's where you go
Yeah.
to party and to have a good time, and that's what it's known for. But there's some really really bad places in LA. LA's really, all major cities have tracks in America.
Yeah.
Who they're areas where Johns go to pick up girls or find exploited women, and there's all. All cities have that, but I would say, yeah, Vegas, LA is probably one of the top places. Actually, I think just statistically, Texas actually has a lot of trafficking cases. It's California and Texas are kind of the biggest states for the most trafficking cases each year. So
Now, is that like per capita, or is that just because they're huge?
I think it's just because they're huge.
Oh, okay.
But so there's a list that says, hey, here's how many trafficking cases
Right.
pop
Okay.
up in each state, and California and Texas are
Yeah.
the two biggest. So
Yeah.
I think that's because of how many people are there.
But at least it centralizes, I guess,
Yeah.
the ability to probably be more effective, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does it look like then, exactly what you're doing? Like, what's on the ground work look like for you?
Yeah. So when we, just depending on what we're working, I mean, we have two other organizations. So
Yeah.
Free is focused. When I'm working with Free, it's usually partnering with, working on a team of investigators who are going out and following leads, almost like a detective would do. So that would be a lot of private investigation for specific missing kid cases. So you're knocking on doors. I mean, we've done things like you search a kid's room of a parent who it's a runaway. So you're searching their room looking for, leads to find out where they went. You're actually literally working a missing kid case. So that entails a whole lot of just following up leads. And so you may be, as a team member, given a lead to say, hey, go and connect with these people, go look at these areas, connect at the school, whatever. And so that's a lot of what we do with Free International when we're on site working with them at a specific missing kid case or an event.
Yeah.
So during, we have a handful of weeks throughout the year that we, a few years ago, 2017, started Operation for Freedom under the umbrella of Free International. And Operation for Freedom is this volunteer organization where individuals, advocacy groups, church groups, we have colleges and campus groups come, and they serve in Las Vegas, and we take a portion of that week and educate them on human trafficking, and then we actually go out on the streets and do outreach. It's for 18 plus, you got to be 18 years or older.
Sure, yeah.
And we go out on the streets and really educate and teach individuals, volunteers, on these volunteer weeks how to do advocacy work in their community and how to connect with local community partners and NGOs on how to do this. And so a lot of our work on the grounds, a lot of my work throughout the year is actually educating and leading these groups into Vegas. And so we actually reach out to working escorts on the Strip through the dark web. I mean, we teach individuals how to find these girls. Like a John, we decided years ago, if a John can fly to Las Vegas and get a girl to show up to his hotel room and communicate with her via the web and texting and communication, then we can do that too as advocacy workers.
Oh, sure.
Like we can
Yeah.
connect with these girls.
Yeah.
And so we just began to reach out to them, and instead of saying, hey, let's hook up, let's come to my hotel room, we would say, hey, I know you're busy, I know you're working, but we're not here to purchase anything from services from you, but we just want to offer help and hope. And if you want out of this life, you want a new life, we have resources for you. And you'd be surprised at how much good work you can do when you just offer a helping hand. It's
Right.
not some technical special thing. It's just, well, it's not special in our eyes sometimes, but just saying, hey, if you want help, going into these dark places in our world and just being brave enough to go in and go, hey, we're here to help. And then having resources on the back end,
Yeah.
you know, to be able to provide them help and hope and a new life and, you know, transportation and temporary housing and then a place to recover and, you know, lining up these things. We just begin to jump in and do this, and you'd be surprised at how many take that offer of hope. And so a lot of what I'm doing on the ground, like my day to day is we're setting up these major reach outs, you know, outreaches to these girls in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
And training individuals on how to do this in their communities. Because, I mean, we look at Vegas and we've got about 100, I would say 160 massage parlors, which are, you know them as massage parlors. We know them as illegal brothels.
Okay.
That are in you know, our nation.
Yeah.
But we've got about 160 in a 6-block area, and so it's concentrated. I mean, you go on Spring Mountain in Vegas, and it is there taking individuals in and to show them this actual, like, women being prostituted and sex workers, like, and seeing a pimp face to face and being able to reach into these dark
Wow.
places. It's
Yeah.
powerful, and then
Yeah.
to take that back to your community and be able to go, okay, we have a massage parlor or two in our community.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a bigger town, you probably have multiple
Yeah.
massage parlors to be able to identify and say, is this a legitimate massage parlor? Is this or is this a front for prostitution? And having that education, it helps bring that awareness to those rural communities, like
Yeah.
we were talking about, and create a better, you know, a safer community, man. So that's a lot of what we do on the ground. So is leading those groups in through Operation for Freedom.
It's got to be so scary for the victims to possibly, like, reach out and take that helping hand as well. Like,
Oh, yeah.
to make that step. And I'm sure you run into cases too where you're like, well, and I guess I'm assuming here, obviously, but where you can see that they need help and they're just so held back to or scared to take it, you know, and you're like, here it is, you know, come on, and so it's.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, the acceptance rates per, you know, ask or per connection, it's a process. You know, we say quite often, rescue is a process, not an event. So
Yeah.
you know, it's an ongoing thing, and especially in these massage parlors where we're going into, it's, you know, they change about every 7 weeks. The girls do. They transition through. So we're looking at, you know, a small window to consistently reach these girls, and hopefully they take the information. You know, usually it's a little number. It's something they can hide or memorize.
Yeah.
It's something that they can take, and hopefully they make the call. I mean, we've seen, you know, in a year at the most, you know, half a dozen, you know, come out of these, you know, concentrated areas. So it's not the numbers are grim, man. It's not less than 1% of human trafficking victims are ever rescued nationally or like worldwide. Less than 1% right now. And so it's a huge need. I mean, that's grim, but it's also a challenge and a call to action. Like, we've got to do something about this.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that was my whole point at the beginning, is just bringing awareness to this. And you know, it seems like the heavy hitters and stuff, they don't necessarily want to touch it either. And maybe they do, but I haven't seen it. And there's just too many other little, like you said, semantic things that are being drawing our attention to, that I think is just a big waste of time.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy. Do you have an individual or like a cool story that where you went through the process of rescuing, like you just said, and now this person is living a free life, is living a or maybe they're not, they haven't arrived yet, because I would assume it'd be like probably a long process to get, you know, clean. I know, you know, they get a lot of these victims on drugs and stuff. They get them addicted to all of these things, and so that process is not easy. I know a lot of people that deal with addiction, and that alone is is one of the hardest battles to deal with.
Oh yeah.
Not to even mention like the mental struggles that they're going through as well. So I didn't know if you had a story of someone that, just to kind of give some hope and joy, into such a deep, heavy conversation like that. So,
man, we, just kind of shooting from like free to Operation for Freedom to our school assembly program, just kind of the stories through there.
Yeah.
Every year when we actually in 2 weeks, I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but in a few weeks from now, we'll be in Vegas with the big search, and all these community partners are going to come together. And every year, as the volunteers go out on the streets and search for missing kids, there's between 20 and 30 kids who are found and brought back in. And that, when it comes to those stories, it could be as simple as a kid who got misplaced in the foster care system. I know that sounds crazy, but it happens all the time. It could be a kid who was just couch surfing. He ran away and was couch surfing with friends that we're able to locate. It could be as complicated as, we found 5 or 6 girls on the free outreach big search, 6 girls in an apartment complex being prostituted who were missing, and they were all in one apartment. 6 kids on the list, boom, 1 find.
Wow.
And that was just through following leads. And so they were brought out and they were taken through that process of getting to a safe home or back to parents or whatever. And on that free side, with Operation for Freedom, every year, just this last year, our ladies who were operating our call center, was what we call it, as they go into the dark web. Just this last year, I believe it was about this time, we had a young lady respond. And just, after 6 or 8 hours of conversation via a burner phone, we were talking to her. She just said, yeah, I've got 10 minutes. I want help. And so our team was able to, this is guys in a van. They set up a perimeter. They meet her at a McDonald's, her pimp may be there, maybe not. But, there's a security perimeter. They're able to go in and with a trauma-informed counselor, and they were able to pull her out and get her help. That's just kind of the short version of a rescue and what it looks like. And, that wasn't 1,000 girls. That was just 1 girl last year. And we were able to get her into a home and right then on a plane and out of town. And, one of the quotes from one of the operators who, when they pulled her out was, she said, there was like 35 operators and people in this garage area when they brought her back. And she said, is this all for me? Like, was this all for me? And I just thought that was a powerful quote. Like, was this all of this for me? It's like, yeah, it was, lady. This was all for you. I love that because that's really, it's such a huge teamwork. It's such a huge army of people to make this happen. But this one story, I'll tell you. Last year we were in schools with the Say Something school assembly program. And we spoke it was 2019, we spoke to almost 100,000 kids right before COVID hit. And then school assemblies just got obliterated, man. Like no school would have us come in. But we had spoken to almost 100,000 kids in junior highs and high schools across America, multiple schools, everywhere. And we were in this school in southern Missouri. It was a large high school, and every school assembly starts with high intensity. We have a DJ who turned records for Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre back in the day. He was on MTV when MTV actually had music, and he was old school,
when it was music television.
DJ Cadillac, and he's got a powerful story of attempting suicide and a friend stepping in. He shares his story when we speak on suicide. But this was a trafficking school assembly this day, and high intensity. It's funny. We come out, we tell some jokes and laugh, get everybody kind of riled up, and then it goes from happy, and it kind of starts getting more and more serious as we begin to educate kids. And then there's always this one moment where Leah comes out. She's a survivor and a speaker. She's just this powerful lady, has a tremendous story of being trafficked and exploited. She comes out onto the gym floor and begins to share her story and talk about being exploited and what that looks like. And a lot of times, students and even adults don't really realize that trafficking is an exchange of value. It's not so much, we don't really like, what is trafficking? It's somebody being prostituted on the streets. They're walking the streets and turning tricks or whatever whatever terminology we connect to it. But at its base form, trafficking is an exchange of value. So, that could be a student who does a sexual favor or service to somebody else to get a phone, or they run away from home, but they're still in school. They're have a bad home life and they need some place to sleep, and so they offer sex to have a place to sleep or a meal.
Oh, yeah.
And so when there's an exchange of value. And that's technically trafficking. And so we don't realize how simple it can be when it comes to sexual exploitation, and how that could be termed really quickly. And
the different variables of contact that these traffickers have to get in on these victims.
It's never. It's not always this big trafficking drug cartel, with this big brothel and this business. It could be a family member. Yeah. And that's really what this story is about. As Leah was sharing her story, she shares her story. You can hear a pin drop, man, in a school gym. We get them riled up and kids are kind of chatty. But when Leah comes out, man, it's like the place is silent. She shares her story. And I kid you not, every school assembly we do, there's a moment at the end. I'm always waiting. I got my hands, I'm rubbing them, just ready to, okay, it's going to happen. Here it comes, And there's always this moment where a young lady from the top of the stands comes down, tears in her eyes, wraps her arms around Leah and says, hey, your story that you shared today, that's my story. Jeez, what you said, I had no idea this was happening to me. I've never considered myself a prostitute or someone who was being taken advantage of, but because of your story and what you shared, that's my story. And so if you're saying this happened to you and this is your life, that's happening to me, I'm not going to leave this place until I get some help. And so I'm always expecting that girl. And this was different, man. This assembly, I'm waiting, nothing happened, no girl came down, no. And usually sometimes there's multiple girls, and we're able to get them help and get them to a counselor, a resource officer, right there. Nothing was happening, and this young guy come down. He was a senior in high school, about to graduate, young man. Just a good-looking, look like a college kid, sports looking dude, looks like he played football. Came down and walked right past me, and he shook Bo's hand. That's DJ Cadillac, and he didn't want to talk to Leah, but he shook Bo's hand, and we're standing there, and he began to share a story with Bo as we were standing there. And Bo's kind of the popular guy, he's the cool guy in the school assemblies. Yeah. And we're standing there, and he begins to share his story, and he said, hey, I felt comfortable talking to you. I didn't want to talk to Leah, but Leah shared her story, and I just want to share mine with you. And he began to talk about his mom, who was a drug addict most of his life, and they lived, in a trailer park, just a few miles away. And he said, since I was 11 years old, my mom had trained me how to do sexual things, services to truckers at the truck stop. And on the weekends, to feed her drug habit, he said, and to pay the bills and have groceries and to help me through school, she would take me to the truck stop, and she would, he's like, I know now this is wrong. He's like, this has been something I've been ashamed of my entire life. I've never told anyone. But he's like, she would take me there, and she would give me to these truckers, and I would do things in their trucks, and then we would go truck to truck. And he said, she's told me this is the only way we can pay the bills, baby. This is how we take care of our family. And this was his life all through high school, since he was 11. And he said, just recently I've been doing this. This is how I take care of my mom and her drug addiction. And from 11 to being a senior, and he said, I want help. And we were able to step in and get this kid help, prosecute his mom, and get him out of this life. So, we always talk about the girls,
right,
being in bad places, but man, this is happening to young guys at a young age, all the time as well. And so, gosh, super thankful we were able to just simply share a message, share a story, a life story of Leah, and it was able to communicate that exchange of value. How, kids look at trafficking as, the movie Taken, like they see
Right.
that and they go, oh, that's not me. So I'm
Yeah.
cool. This is just a messed up, jacked up world.
Yeah.
This is my family. This is how we take care of, this is how we put groceries on the
normal.
table. Yeah. And that's called familial trafficking. That's one mom.
Familial
Family trafficking.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
And so that's just one mom, one son, and it's trafficking. It's not a gang member in the city with multiple girls, your typical pimp,
Right.
that you would think. But that's one of those stories of redemption and like a rescue, and like it wasn't kicking in a door. It was in a school assembly.
Yeah.
And it was educating and bringing awareness that made that happen. So those are the stories we live for, man. They're rare, but those are the stories I live for, dude. Yeah.
It's a shame that it is so rare, but gosh, maybe you just keep grinding so that those stories become more and more, that they happen more often.
That's the goal, man. That's the mission, dude. Yeah.
That is. Well, and as you were telling that story, like I'm sitting here just kind of feeling again like how hard it was probably for that gentleman to do that, to make that step. I mean,
Absolutely.
the humiliation involved in all of that, and gosh, I mean,
it's tough to we've got some amazing, just to brag on the team with the school assembly program, some amazing people who create an atmosphere in that moment for students to respond. A safe place, man, where the real work is after the school assembly, where they give this, this time. I get up and tell jokes and be funny, but like the real reason we're there is this moment at the end where you give time for students to respond, and to be able to interact, and we, as you set the teachers up to be heroes, and for this ongoing thing, there's this moment. It's powerful. It's heavy. Where students go, okay, I'm safe. I can go to this guy who talked, or that girl who talked. I can go to them. Whoever, they came to my school today, but I feel safe with them. And I think just the authenticity of their stories. It's not some fake motivational speech. It's not somebody making a living off the schools, or in there for any other reason besides we are here to help students and to resource these schools and to really make a difference. It's not about money or fame or egos or business or anything else besides making an impact. And when you hear stories like that, man, it's like, whew, that's why we do what we do. That's, it's not one person. It's not just some issue of human trafficking or exploitation, but it's this kid's life, It's people. And the more you zoom in and get away from that 30,000 foot view of trafficking, and you zoom in, man, you really realize we're helping people. Like, this is a human life that we're helping. And that's the mission, man.
And it's really good that you're trying to cut it off before it gets super messy. Granted, like you just shared, I mean, some of them are already in the thick of it, but educating at a really young age and bringing awareness to these kids, because they're getting blindsided most of the time, and they don't even know they're in it until they're in it. Well, just like that gentleman, that was his norm, and he never even knew that. Well, I'm sure at some point he did, but then when it's your norm, that's just it. But
I think there's something wrong with it, but 90%. I don't know the statistic, but most victims don't identify as trafficking victims. They don't identify as like, I'm a trafficking victim until that awareness, that education, and a lot of times it takes even years, even once they're rescued and brought through that process, it takes a while for them to realize this was done to me, I'm a victim, and then they become survivors. But most don't even. It's a rare thing, man, at first for a victim to say. right
Good
off the bat.
grief.
So, yeah, man.
That's
But there's hope, dude. There's, it's heavy,
Yeah.
but it's like there's hope, man. There's stories and there's lives getting saved, and dude, that's what it's about, man. You
Yeah.
know, that's a happy, joyous thing when you go, man, there's people, not just us, there's multiple organizations. And dude, I'm so a proponent of all the advocacy work that happens in local communities. Like even here in this community, the local organizations and advocates who are working in trafficking, in foster care, man, we've got some amazing people, because foster care is feeding this issue, trafficking. 80% of the cases that come through law enforcement that are prosecuted trafficking cases are foster kids who are in the foster system. So it's a big issue. If you want to make a difference in human trafficking, help foster care, jump into foster care, resource foster care, do something about the issue, in your community.
Wow. Well, let's continue with this, kind of lightening up the mood, and we'll wrap it up maybe here in just a little bit. But so what does an assembly look like?
Yeah.
From the very, very beginning, because you're obviously making phone calls and trying to see like who's involved, who wants to maybe have you guys come in. So what does that look like?
Oh, just getting like booked and coming into a community, or like just the actual program?
The whole thing, getting it booked, and then like the assembly, what the assembly looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my hope in this at a local level, and maybe you guys have already done this, but is that some principal or some teacher might happen to watch this podcast,
Yeah,
and then be like, well, let's have that here.
Yeah.
So what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, we there is, it's a large production that we do. Occasionally, there's a school that just needs one person to come speak. That's usually the last resort. We usually try to stay away from that. Just one talking head, one person putting on a show, or talking for an hour. But Say Something is really a production, man. We've got these massive screens that go up with projectors that show like super fast moving content that's inspiring. There's a speaker that speaks for just a few minutes, and then it's a video, and then it's a speaker, and then a video, and a speaker, and a video, and a DJ. And it's very interactive. About every 4 to, I would say, 6 minutes, you're changing directions, so it keeps students engaged. I mean, they're engaged with TikTok nowadays, with social media. I mean, our attention spans, even as adults, are like so short.
Yeah, they really are.
So you've got to change directions immediately. And that's, I would say, a bad thing, like that's not a good thing. Like we need long form content where people can dig in and really know people's
it's
hearts.
sad that you have to do that, but
that's how you get attention, though. That's how you, in those moments,
Yeah.
So it's a very fast-moving program. Starts off with, this big video, countdown video, hypes kids up, and a DJ's there. We get kids going. We bring teachers onto the gym floor and do fun stuff with them. And so it's real fast-paced, man. We do sometimes dance-offs and air band competitions. We've done like Fortnite dance competitions where the dances come on the screens. Teachers have to compete to see who can do the best Fortnite dance. I think that's getting old now. I think Fortnite's still a thing, but you have to change it up so much. But
everything changes so
it's just
fast.
high energy, fast paced, a lot of fun. And then it goes from that to, kind of a motivational, kind of shooting in the middle zone emotionally, inspirational, good academics, and we talk about, being a leader and a hero in your school, and just really inspiring students to be better peers and better students.
Yeah, better to each other.
Yeah, and depend on teachers. Teachers, they may be tough on you, but they love you. They're there. I mean, they make a really lame salary.
Yeah.
Most of them do, because they're not there for the money. They're there because they want to better their communities. They're good people who are, it's almost a calling to be a teacher nowadays, because you're not there for the money. You're there because you want to make an impact and educate students. And so we make teachers the heroes, man. It's not about us. We don't, walk out going, hey, we're rock stars, we're the big show. At the end, like it's all about the teachers and how big of a hero they are. And so most
people that are
schools
going to be in their lives.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
After the
it's
assembly.
those counselors and teachers who are there, who love them, and it opens up that channel of communication. And so they know like, oh, I didn't, and my teacher was like, I know they taught me, but I didn't know they were there for me in these ways. And,
right, because that's something that they, especially if you're struggling in a class, you're not looking at that teacher as like someone who really cares for you.
No. Yeah, they're hard on you because they see the potential in you.
Right,
They get that message. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you don't know that until somebody tells you in a creative way, and that's what we do. Yep. And we're obviously there. Like we've talked about, we educate students on the red flags of trafficking and how you can respond. See it, report it, respond. If you see something, say something. Yeah. You can be a hero. You can say something about your own situation. You can say something about another student's situation. There's that saying, one of our speakers, he always says, you've heard that saying, silence is golden. He's like, it's not. Silence is deadly. Silence is what kills. We've got to speak up about the issues in our friends, in our community, and those who are going through tough situations. And so it's very inspiring, very, very fast paced. And so, we have a lot of, I would say most of our inroads into communities are local, passionate people. It could be church groups, advocacy groups, like anti-trafficking organizations that are local and work local advocacy with law enforcement or in the community who band together and say, hey, we want to bring in, say something. And so they connect, and they're influential people. Sometimes they're business people, in a local community. It's never a school that calls us and says, hey, we want to bring you in. I mean, occasionally, there's that small slice percentage, but most of the time it's passionate people who are passionate about making a difference in trafficking. They want to see a change in their community, and they offer Say Something as a resource to the school system. And so they raise the funds personally. They create, the resources to bring us in, bring this production in, and say, hey, to go to the school district with influential people who have some clout, people trust, and say, hey, this is a legitimate program. Because there's a lot of crazy programs and a lot of just crazy stuff out there, that school superintendents have to deal with. And so when you have somebody who's intelligent and influential in the community approach them and say, hey, we've got this great program. They've last year they saw 19 prosecuted cases of human trafficking come out of schools in school districts where they thought they had no problem, but they were able to resource this. It was a huge win for the district, huge win for the community. They set the teachers up as heroes. They sell that to the district. Obviously, it's usually a thumbs up. And so we usually do 2 to 3 major tours every school year. And this year, we're booked. It's going to be a great year going into schools. And we're already booking into 2023 right now as far as school districts go. So it's always passionate people who want to make an impact. And we are more than happy to help resource and give ideas on how to make it happen in a creative way. Yeah.
So how does somebody who might be interested in being a part of something like this, how would they go about getting into a position like you or a talented DJ who's super passionate about like what we're talking about? How would they go about getting into a situation where they're involved in these assemblies and things like that?
Yeah, man. I think first and foremost would be volunteering. Like that's how we, my road into this world wasn't a professional route. Right. It was an accidental route. Mm-hmm. It was based out of a passion and a heart to be involved in this. And so I volunteered. We volunteered. I started off making promotional videos at a very low quality level for the school assembly program. As a youth counselor, I was like, hey, you guys are a great program. Can I show up and make you a cool promo video, because you don't have anything, Yeah. And they're like, yeah, you can show up for free. Yeah, you're going to pay for it. Yeah. I was like, man, I'm coming for free. Like I'll pay my own plane ticket, hotel, and I was just a servant, man. And not that I'm some awesome person, but just willing to go, hey, this is a big deal to me. I want to help and use my talents. Yeah. And that turned into, helping with sound and audio, and then hauling in equipment, production equipment. And then it was like, hey, we need someone to do this one section, this one bit at the beginning. Hey, Dawson, you do it, Okay, you can do it. Okay. So then it turned into being a presenter and a speaker with Say Something, and it started from the bottom and serving.
Yeah.
And so if you're interested in working with Say Something, we would love to have you volunteer to help set up screens and audio equipment. And you can connect with us through our website. Just say, hey, I want to show up. And that's, it's not going to be paid.
Sure.
But, honestly, that's how it starts, man. That's none of us are actually paid to do this work. We all self-fund to do it still, the entire team. When we speak, when we go out and do this, schools and local community people, resource that and pay for it to make it happen.
Yeah.
That pays for the production and everything to come into town, the fuel and all that kind of stuff to get the production into town. But as far as team members go, we don't get a salary or a paycheck from any of these organizations. We self-fund and make it happen on our own because that's our passion, man.
Yeah.
We want to make this happen and not be a burden to these organizations. We're going to show up and do this for the mission. That's what it's about. So if you're wanting to jump in and get involved in any of our work, Operation for Freedom is a huge beginning part of the funnel where you can come on a volunteer trip as well. I mean, we host numerous trips throughout the year. We're actually hosting, we've hosted a couple teams from this community here who have come to Vegas and served with us. And that is a great way to plug into anti-human trafficking work, to get educated on what it really looks like, to see it with your own eyes, to do some good work. Even if that's all you do is just come and serve and do good work, we need the help.
Yeah.
We really do. It's not just a program where you come and serve and it's, hey, we kind of roll our eyes at volunteers. No, it's not like that at all. We utilize the volunteers to do the work.
Yeah.
And then with the big search, man, we do big searches all around the nation, in cities all around the nation on a regular basis. And the big search is the missing kid searches that Free International does. And so there's plenty of volunteer opportunities to connect and show up and go out on the streets looking for missing kids. So a lot of volunteer opportunities. That's where it starts.
How, and this is terrible that I'm even asking this, but I mean, I know I can walk into a Walmart and there's like that billboard there with like the missing kids, there's like a big billboard there. Is there like another source where you can kind of see where or who's missing? Because I have no clue. I mean, other than like the Walmart billboard.
Yeah, you can. I think one of the best places you can go is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We could probably put that in the information on the podcast.
Definitely.
National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They're the most up-to-date website and resource you can go to and see. You can narrow it down for your state and your community, and they really keep tabs like up to date within, if I'm correct, within like the hour of when those kids are found. So as soon as they're found, man, it's like updated quickly within a few hours anyway. Maybe
That's
not every hour.
still pretty great.
Yeah, it's very, very active. We use that a lot when it comes to, getting information on missing kids, and missing kid searches. And that's where our team is connected with the staff, and they're a great resource to look at. A lot of information too, as well. Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. Okay. So
if I'm correct too, I think the pictures in Walmart are from, we call it NCMEC, I think is what it's called. Yeah, National.
NCMEC?
Yeah, National Center. Yeah.
Okay.
The little acronym. So there's a lot of acronyms when it gets into advocacy work. You have to keep up here.
Well, it's crazy too, because even when you walk by those billboards, or not billboards, but those like cork boards or whatever, and you have all those kids, it's overwhelming just to see that. And
yeah,
it's crazy because I a lot of times when I walk by, I'm like, are those the local kids that are missing here, or is it a national thing, or is it both? I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly. I would just off the top of my head assume they were national, but they're probably regionally, they suspect they're in the area, so they're probably not local, but they almost like an Amber Alert where they kind of know a region. Those same faces may not be back east, in New York, but they kind of know, hey, this is kind of where they're at. But yeah, I mean, facial recognition too. I believe Walmart has it where when those faces walk in, we utilize it with casinos when we do missing kid searches, like in Vegas. The casinos will give us access to their facial recognition. I mean,
Because that's like top notch.
Oh man, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy who runs a lot of the security in the casinos in Vegas, who works with us, was like this 25-year FBI veteran who now runs security. They have some of the most intense facial recognition. Like if you get kicked out of a casino and you're banned, you're blacklisted, you walk into a casino, within seconds they know you're there. I mean, it's just he reads your face.
Smokes.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so when you put the faces of these kids into, the specific kids you're looking for into the database, it can immediately recognize them, multiple ages and, different, it can, if it's just the eyes with a mask on, it still can pop on. And I mean, they've got stuff everywhere to make it happen. So it's really, really valuable. Like when that happens,
that's good
when
to
you're able
know,
to find a kid.
because
And I think Walmart though has the same stuff going on too. I think they do I think that's, I just read an article about this where Walmart was putting that into their system. So if kids come through, Walmart is like a great place for, everybody goes to Walmart at some point to find these kids. But
yeah. And I was just going to say, most of the time with facial recognition, I'm always have this like leery feeling about it, right? As I'm like looking at my phone or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But it's nice to know that, in my conspiracy or old thought process that goes on all the time, that technology is helping, and it is.
Oh yeah.
It is.
Well, if we have it on our phones to unlock your phone and how you see how amazing it works.
Yeah.
Just think about, some of the stuff that they can incorporate with law enforcement and different agencies, those 3-letter agencies out there, that we don't have access to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
But it still doesn't come down. I mean, with all that, we still have missing kids. And, I was actually on a podcast a few weeks ago out of California, and we talked about just the value of being a person who looks for the vulnerable people in your community, having an eye for vulnerable people groups, that's really where all this starts. That's where it all starts is bad neighborhoods and kids alone in the park and people in vulnerable places that predators can prey on them. That's we have facial recognition, but it doesn't beat people who have an eye for the vulnerable in their community. Yeah. And those are my people, the people who drive down the street and go, oh man, that person's in need, or there's a situation in my community. I got to do something about that. That's really my kind of people right there. And those are the people who make a huge difference in communities across America.
Yeah. Dude. I mean, just giving tips and leads and all kinds of stuff that, it's, I don't know if this will be a good thing or whatever, but is there a couple things that people can educate themselves on real quick that you could share that maybe what to look for in their community? Like if they're just out going to the grocery store or something like that, is there certain things that you might be able to see and to be able to draw attention to this victim, or this person is a victim, and I don't know, just something that people can kind of educate themselves as they're out in the community. Is there tells, or what? I don't know what you would call them. Yeah.
No. Absolutely. I always suggest. We've got the great Google, and it's I can tell you a few things, but it's as simple as far as red flags go. You can literally just type in on Google. The red flags of trafficking, and it'll give you a list of like, hey, it doesn't look like a girl in fishnet stockings and a short skirt and high heels, right. In most communities. But most communities, it's an older guy with a very younger girl who isn't his daughter. They usually have a hoodie on. Yeah, the hood's over the head, baggy sweatpants. A lot of times they're transitional from, like at a truck stop. In rural communities, a lot of like Love's truck stops and those places is really where you're going to see a lot of transitional moments when it comes to trafficking, and you're going to be able to spot really underage kids with just something that feels off. And that, that's one of the biggest things and I just said this is like looking for someone who is in a vulnerable state. You've been in those situations where you walk into a gas station or somewhere, you see a homeless person, you're like, well, they're homeless, and maybe you give them some money or help them out with a meal or something. But there's those moments where you see someone and they just look vulnerable. They just look troubled. They look down. They won't look you in the eye. It's a young girl or a boy who's in this vulnerable spot. And I think keeping an eye to that vulnerability, and it could be a million different things, but it could be, being around your really high crime areas, high risk areas in your community. You're looking at the outskirts of those areas and seeing, kids walking on their own and seeing kind of how they interact with the people around them. Is it more kids or is it just adults? And it's like one kid who kind of looks in it like it looks off, like it's a gut feeling.
Yeah.
And, you can list off a bunch of red flags, but the most leads that we've developed that have basically worked their way into a rescue, an actual thing, an actual like, hey, this girl's being prostituted, or this is an underage kid being, abused and exploited that's being out there, is by someone who had a gut feeling because they were sensing vulnerability. They were looking and going, there's something not right in that, in that home next door.
Yeah.
In my community, there is something not right. There's, bars on the windows in a great community. That's been a lot of cases where great community, no crime, and this house has bars on the windows, or there's 19 people living in this one tiny home, and there's a massage parlor 2 blocks away, and it's an Asian family, and there's like 20 or 30 people that live in this one house. That's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
And so just having that eye for looking for vulnerability, being suspicious. I mean, you don't, and it's not a bad thing to be suspicious, and being able to, be a part of that community of people who is like the neighborhood watch,
Yeah.
So I think that's my biggest advice, is having an eye for vulnerability.
Yeah. I think overall too, we just need to be, if we see people like that, like, maybe just go be a shining light for them.
Yeah, or report it, or call it in.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to call it in and be like, hey, I'm noticing this, call the sheriff's department.
But even if you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, there's something way more going on. I mean, it could just be a kid that's having a bad day,
Yeah, still doesn't hurt.
But again, that's one of those variables that lead to these victims going further and deeper than they ever thought possible.
Yeah.
And that's just being a better person,
Yeah. I just had this conversation with, it was actually this podcast I was on a few weeks ago, and we talked about, my daughter just got her phone, her first phone. She's 13, or she's going to be 13. And we talked about, how to keep them safe on phones, and offered some resources to that. But we were talking about, like, there's this point where you have to invade your kid's life before somebody else invades their life. If your kid has access to the internet unfiltered in their room, then the world has access to them. And, when you're speaking to this, red flags in your community, and like just reaching out to somebody, like, you've got to be willing to invade those situations before somebody else does. You may you may kick over a stone, and there is a trafficking case. I mean, we've worked a case here in town where that happened with a local friend of ours who just was suspicious. It was an apartment complex. It was a young girl, and she's just like, hey, I know this girl. I think there's something going on. And it actually ended up being a real case here in town. And that was just because she kicked over a stone. She invaded. She's like, hey, I'm gonna push in and just ask questions and see what's going on in a nice way. And I think that's really what it comes down to. We can easily Google the red flags. We can easily get educated online. I mean, there's so much more information now than there was before. 10 years ago, out there. It's a simple Google search on your phone. Boom, you've got some red flags, and just being attentive to that vulnerability in our world. Because, I mean, if you're proactive about it, you find what you're looking for. You always, if you drive a car of a certain make and model, you always notice that car. When you first get it, you're like, oh, there's another one. Just like, oh yeah, hey, there's another one.
Exactly.
You always, it's on your mind. You're attentive to it. You're focused on it.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes, man. That's really what it takes.
Yeah, that's so cool. Real quick again for the watchers, listeners, or whatever. The groups that you are involved in again.
Yeah. So my wife and I founded operationforfreedom.org. We also work full-time with freeinternational.org, a rescue organization. And then our school assembly program is saysomethingschooلاssembly.com. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Right on.
And I can get those to you, and you can toss them in the notes, I guess. So
Yeah, I will.
we would love to connect with anyone who's interested to do this work and have a conversation. We'd love it.
It needs to happen a lot more.
Yeah, man.
Than it is right now. So,
Absolutely.
Andrew, thank you so much, man. Thanks
Been a
for
pleasure.
coming on and just bringing some more awareness to something that needs that could never have enough awareness, really. So thank you, and appreciate you, man. And
Dude,
looking forward to this
love it.
relationship continuing too. Like,
heck yeah, man.
and I'd love to have you on again, like maybe after the tour, you know, or something like that.
Love to.
To just kind of come back with some of those fresh stories. And
absolutely,
you know, obviously the hope is that you have that gentleman who comes out of the bleachers and comes and walks in to one of the volunteers or one of the staff. I don't know exactly how you call them, but and just to continually grind and the spark for hope, you know, is really, really cool. So thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
Andrew Dawson, you're the man. We'll talk soon.